So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming to our afternoon session of this conference. First of all, let me thank you on my behalf, on behalf of all the panelists, to Center for International Relations and Sustainable Development, Vuk Jeremić, to the Center's partners for organizing this conference. As I was actually reading this morning the news, I was just thinking that this could not be possibly a more timely conference. In the Financial Times, on the very top, the first news was, are oil and gas groups facing existential threats? In fact, if you think about oil and gas groups, these are among the largest companies in the world. And there's now a whole discussion and debate about how a lot of the business models and potentially some of the world's greatest, biggest, most valuable companies will be completely disrupted by, in effect, climate change and the policy discussions and implications of these policy discussions on these groups. I could not help thinking that this conference couldn't be more timely also because what happened last week with China and United States agreeing in this regard. So either the center is extremely well informed ahead of what things happening, or it simply really has its finger on the pulse of the times. In any case, that's why it's really wonderful to be here today. We have a very distinguished list of panelists from all around the world, both from the regions and from as far as away as United States, Middle East. I would propose to keep this very dynamic discussion. So we have agreed with the panelists that instead of having very long introductory remarks, we'll start with very short statements that we will kick off with specific questions. But before we do that, I would like to introduce our panelists. And actually, since we have 7 panelists, rather than going through the whole list right away and test how good your memory is, I will introduce each panelist as they speak. So the first person on our panel is Mr. Aleksandar Vlahović. He's the president of the Serbian Association of Economists. Those of you who are from Serbia no doubt know him very well. He started his career in consulting, but has done some very distinguished work as a member of the first pro-reform government between 2001 and 2004, when he was the Minister of Economy and Privatizations. And right now, he's the Vice President of the Managing Board of Erste Bank. So, Mr. Vlahović, if I may, so as a businessman, but also as an economist and a former policymaker, what do you think are the main sectors of the Serbian economy and potentially even economies at large in this wider region in Southeastern Europe that could most benefit and hopefully are also most ready for the transformation to a green economy?
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I think now it's working, yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Bruncko. Since the vast majority of you are Serbian speakers, I will switch to Serbian, and later on during the Q&A session, I will come back in English. Okay, so,
so to be able to find out which sectors are best for the development of green economy, that is for the transformation from brown into green economy, we need to see what is the situation of Serbia today. I will just give you a short macroeconomic outlook, and then I'll mention the 3 areas that I think are the key areas for the development of green economy. As you know, this year we have a fall in GDP. It's at the level that we had in 2008. It didn't have a significant development. And the forecasts for the next year are also very bad. We are going to have a decrease in 0.5%, and recession will continue. The level of fixed investment is less than 20% of GDP, which is insufficient for more dynamic development. Unemployment is below 20%. And 2 deficits that are very important. The deficit in current payments is 7.5%, and the percentage of the trade deficit is above 12%, plus macroeconomic instability. If on top of that we add the budget deficit, which is above 8% this year of the GDP. So naturally, we're going to have a period of fiscal consolidation, preparing for structural reforms. And within these reforms, we need to find a chance for the transformation of brown economy into the green economy. According to the strategy, we identified 3 sectors. The first sector relates to supply, energetic demand, and something that we call the improving of energy efficiency, reducing gas emissions, and decreasing the energy consumption in the transport sector, in the industry, and in construction of commercial and industrial buildings. The second area, according to the strategy, where we can most easily create a conversion between brown into green economy, is the increase of new renewable sources of energy. And here we have a lot of representatives that will be speaking about this. In other words, we need to change the structure of the supply. And currently we have dominant thermonuclear plants, and that is 1/4 of hydrological plants for the production of electrical energy, and renewable sources of energy are minor, so we have to increase that along with previous savings of 10% and reducing the gas emissions. And this will contribute to the faster transformation from brown into green economy. The last point is agriculture, and that is the development of organic agriculture. At this point, very little agricultural land is done for organic production. According to the strategy, till 2013, we need to have 150,000 hectares for organic production, and which, of course, will bring us this much needed added value, which is not negligible. Many studies say that added value in organic production is between 20 to all 200% on basic manufacturing. And we need investments for all of this, and that's why today we're talking about the possibility of public-private partnership. And what does the state need to do in order to incite this partnership? We need to have a clear policy, clear regulatory framework, clear monetary and fiscal incitive measures. And I'm afraid in the previous period, I believe that those deal with wind energy will speak about this. We had a lot of wondering, a lot of changes that do not give us a long-term stability that will affect the development of this partnership in a good way. And at the end, I would like to say that in case the measures of a planned by this strategy of how to convert a green economy, brown economy into green economy, we need to achieve this in various areas, so we don't have the point of socioeconomic profitability of these projects. We need incitement for the new capital to enter the market, but we also need incitements from the state, because they cannot be implemented without this. And we have a clear effect on the increase of employment. I wouldn't put that in the first front as the main advantage of the conversion from brown to green economy.
Microphone, excuse me.
Our next panelist is Mr. Miodrag Kostić. He is the founder and owner of the MK Group. MK Group is primarily focused on agricultural production, manufacturing, and trading, but is also active in areas such as tourism and, importantly, clean energy production. Now, as a very successful businessman from this region, Mr. Kostić, how do you see the biggest, sort of very specific business opportunities in green growth, sustainable growth in Southeastern Europe? I mean, if you were to pick one that you're really excited about, or two maybe, what would it be?
Martin, first of all, thank you very much to give me the chance to be here in this panel, and I will continue on Serbian too. There is a two magic verb. One is, I will continue in Serbian, but two magic verb, sustainable and green. Dakle, održivo I zeleno.
So, sustainable and green are two magic words. Well, I'm participating at this and many other conferences discussing these two issues. Well, let us see where this word sustainable comes from. It's been around for a very long time, but an increasing number of people globally realizes that the way we live our lives and the way we do our businesses is not sustainable. So if you live in a house and if you do not clean the house and after several generations, the life will be unsustainable. And if you spend more than you earn, your lifestyle is unsustainable. So the sustainable has become a buzzword. And now green, green, green is becoming another buzzword. So let us try to make things sustainable and turn to green energy and green food and so on. Talking about Serbia, I think that Serbia has some advantages. Namely, Serbia is not overly developed country. And I hope that journalists will not take this out of the context when I say that I believe that Serbia has the right to be a little bit less sustainable and a little bit less green for a little bit longer period of time, because it's the developed countries such as the US and other developed countries, China, for example, which is number 2, and some other developed countries that develop their black technologies and develop them without any limitations. And now they're imposing on us new standards, and by using these dark and black technologies, they earn a lot of money in countries such as Serbia. And now they say, well, now the new rules of the game apply. And what I fear, as a businessman, is that compete with them. So the time will come when we will not be able to compete with them, because the enormous money that they've earned, they subsidize the sustainable development. They will simply introduce new rules that we will not be able to follow. So what I want to say is, give us some time, give us some incentive that actually to come closer to you, maybe even subsidies for Serbia to be able to compete in the new sustainable and green sector. Where is the MK Group as one of the leading companies in the region? And namely, we have recognized this opportunity early on, and 5 years ago we started with the projects of building wind farms, but we believe that the wind energy will be one of the key development drivers. And another source of green economy is agriculture, because Serbia is one of the few countries that does not use the biomass, which is an enormous source of green energy. Then also next year, MK Group will be using only geothermal energy and thermal pumps. This is another resource that Serbia is not using sufficiently. So just for you to understand, a hotel in Kopaonik used 1,000 tons of fuel, and as of next year, the consumption will be 0. So all energy used in Kopaonik, at the Kopaonik hotel, will be from geothermal sources. Then organic production that Mr. Vlahović mentioned earlier. is another opportunity. Even there is a general opinion that MK Group lobbies for GMO, which is absolutely not true. I think that Serbia should be a country that has extensive organic production. So I don't want to now to raise the issue of whether we need GMO or not. But what I want to say is that in the next period, the difference in the price of the organic food and other food, this difference will be increasing. So very soon, organic food will be twice as expensive as GMO, and I think that Serbia should set a goal for itself on the level of the national policy to focus on organic production, because we are a small country with 2 million hectares of farming land, compared to Russia that have 170 million hectares, and Ukraine with 42 million hectares. So our option to be sustainable is to focus on organic production of food. But of course, that we need long-term financing and relevant subsidies to achieve that. But if Martin has more questions about this, I will be willing to take them and to answer them.
I will definitely have more questions. Actually, it was one on my list. But before we get there, let me introduce another panelist. It's Mrs. Ljerka Puljić. She's the CEO of Agrokor Group, which is one of the most important holdings in the Western Balkans. And Agrokor's core business is also in the production and distribution of food and drinks, and as well as retail. So, not surprisingly, my question will also touch this area of agriculture. Now, if you run a business group that has agriculture at its core, clearly agriculture is dramatically affected by climate, by the environment. So is climate change something that worries you as a business person? I mean, is this something that you actually think about actively when you are developing your business strategies? Is it part of your business strategies? Does it come into the equation?
Thank you very much for the invitation. I am coming from Agrokor. Agrokor, probably some of you don't know, but Agrokor is this very moment the largest private company in Southeast Europe. We are dealing in agriculture, but as well as in food manufacturing and food retail. That means that we are vertically integrated company, what probably give us a certain advantage towards our competitors who are not capable to react always on the changes with which we are more and more faced. Sad ću preći na hrvatski jer sam obećala kolegama.
Now I'm going to start speaking in Croatian, because I promised that I would give support to my colleagues as far as the communication language, and the majority of the audience, as I can see, understands this language. So I apologize to those that have to listen to the translation. I will stick to your question. Agrokor is a huge manufacturer in agriculture. In Croatia, we deal with 30,000 hectares of land. We produce 400,000 fattening pigs per year, 25,000 calves, and 40 million liters of milk on our own farms. So we have an integrated agricultural production. And for those who don't know, we also process 5,000 hectares of land in Vojvodina. We have a wonderful farm of fattening steers, where we produce thousands of fattening steers per year. When I'm talking about agriculture, we'll also include it through cooperation with smaller farms, because we buy a lot of their produce from small farms, especially for our oil industry, our livestock feed industry, production of soy, corn. We are also at the market as a big organizer of agricultural manufacturing. And of course, this imposed an additional challenge on us to think, and we are aware that whenever that big economic downturn happened in 2008, and crop and oil prices were raised, and we had an imbalance in supply and demand between agricultural products on the one hand and the demand for them. Since then, we've already seen that the changes in the climate are a global challenge for agricultural production, and also in our region. And I have to say this is something that's been happening in the past years, and it's had significant effects. We've talked a lot about the floods that both Croatia and Serbia and Bosnia had. We also had a lot of dry years that were not typical. So the climate is heading towards extremes compared to a temperate climate that we had here. We are adjusting our strategy. Of course, we have been aware of this for a longer period of time, and we have invested a lot in agriculture. Over, I think, 350 million euros we have invested only in agricultural production. And of course, for us, it hasn't only been a challenge, but also an obligation to figure out ways on how we're going to deal with the changes that are happening. First of all, we are aware that in the future, serious agriculture cannot happen without irrigation. Without a good water management system, we cannot function. So we have invested most of our money, and we're still investing in that, is irrigation. And a huge part of our agricultural production is today performed in such surfaces. We need to invest a lot more in land management. The land in our conditions can be processed with a lot more difficulty than we did before, and this will raise the prices. So we have to prepare for the winter, for the spring, because we have great challenges in precipitation on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have droughts as another extreme. We have also diversified our production, and we seriously considered our traditional, I would say, ways on how to do crop production under the open skies, where we nurtured some traditional cultures, traditional crops, 4 crops, which means that every other year we had a different crop. We started seriously producing vegetables, and the crops that we had this summer is a lot less risky, and that's why we started producing more vegetables, more than regular crop cultures. So this is one strategy. And of course, something that we also recognized, and as a trend, we invested seriously into the processing of the waste from our farms. Right now, we have the 3rd investment into biogas plant, a plant that manages, processes waste from our farms, from our slaughterhouses, and it contributes to a lower percentage of bio-waste. Of course, we closed the whole chain there, gas energy, apart from the electricity that we also sell to our operators, to our electric energy distributors. We also invest in the construction of greenhouses. We had greenhouse production on really big surfaces. They are heated with this energy that we obtained, so we have production all year round. So we realized that one part of our production also needs to be covered. One part of our production needs to be, will not happen without irrigation. And something that I would like to say, I'm speaking about us as a big manufacturer, the application of top-notch technology in agriculture of new technologies are one of the ways out. And of course, diversification, because if you are oriented only to one culture, one crop, this can be very risky. Something that where we see a problem, and probably partly I would like to follow on what Kolle said. He provoked me a little bit. In all these conditions, it's very hard for us to be competitive. All of us, especially Croatia, that has just entered the EU, needs to make a lot of adjustments regarding the EU strategy in order to have 40% of renewable energy sources up to a certain year. And we, as manufacturing entities, in a certain way, especially in agriculture, we have to respect a whole line of directives and implement them, and in a certain way, because there is a pressure on us to use less pesticides. So all these directives we have to implement, but of course this causes in certain years and in certain climate conditions, the reduction in our production. So you cannot have a result that you had when the application of pesticides was unlimited. As big manufacturers, we see a challenge in this. On the one hand, you have to produce sustainably, and we agree with this. We absolutely recognize that some ways of productions are not long-term sustainable, but on the other hand, they also cause an increase of costs. That is the drop in efficiency. And you have to deal with this at the global market. I'm not speaking about the EU market. I'm speaking about the global market. You have to be there to compete with the competitors who are not forced to have these kinds of production. So here we have a great challenge on how to be competitive.
Thank you very much for that. One of the topics you touched upon is circular economy. So, and part of that circular economy is how do you turn waste into energy. So, you know, we've touched upon energy. Actually, our next speaker is very familiar with the energy sector. Ana Brnabić is a project director at Continental Wind Serbia, which is part of Continental Wind that develops, finances, and operates wind farms across Central and Eastern Europe, as well as Australia. Ana has worked in senior management position on different international development projects, as well as in the government of Serbia, and she also runs the PEXIM Foundation, which is active in the social responsibility field. Now, Ana, speaking of energy, we heard this morning that actually Serbia is very dependent on coal production, and we also know that energy security and energy dependency is a big issue for Serbia. As an alternative, can clean energy be a really sustainable and a real solution towards significantly improved energy security in this part of the world, or is this something that is, you think, doomed to stay marginal for a very, very long time, and we will have to look for other solutions?
Thank you, Martin. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I'll continue in English because of our guests. The energy security, I think, is the key question in Serbia today. For the longest time, I think that no one in Serbia really thought about energy, which is best seen in the fact that for the past 30 years, we had no new energy object. So basically, you were left with the energy sector that is highly reliant on coal. Not just coal, lignite as the most inefficient and the most the energy source with the highest pollution. So about more than 75% is coal, and then the rest of that is large hydro, which is great, but it's not a lot. That's in the sector of electricity production. In the sector of the heating, then the heating sector is 89 to 90% on gas fueled, and all of the gas is imported and from one single source, Russia. So you can't say that, you know, in the heating sector, you do not have your own heating sector in Serbia. So you have something in your electricity sector, and all of that is you have in the electricity sector is over 30 years old. So the energy sector, unfortunately, in Serbia was kind of doomed to fail. And the floods that happened in May and June 2014 only sped up all of the situation. But it'd be the same without the floods. Maybe we could, you know, we could wait for a couple of more years, but it would be the same. And then the floods in May 2014 revealed just how vulnerable the Serbian energy sector is. And in all honesty, in May and June 2014, you could safely say that Serbia as a country did not have energy sector anymore. And that is the most, I think, irresponsible politics and policy that, that has seriously undermined the security of this country. So in May 2014 and June 2014, we were importing the electricity in Serbia at the rate of 1 million euros per day. The country that argues that renewable energy is expensive. Now this winter, we don't have coal anymore because our biggest coal mine is now 50-meter deep lake. We can maybe use it for tourism, I don't know. It's not sustainable tourism for sure. In 15 days, it was 15 days ago, it was 15 days more. And so the predictions are, not the predictions, I mean the procurement has already been publicized and I think closed, is that we will have to import this year 30,000 tons of coal, 30,000 tons of coal a day to Serbia to fuel our thermal power plants. With that, so the government has set aside about, I think the budget of 106 million euros for coal imports. With that, we'll have to import the electricity, and obviously even before floods, Serbia was a net importer of electricity. 30% of our, you know, we're at 30% net importer. All of our electricity is imported during the winter when it's most expensive. And then in the heating sector, we have to import gas. So we're completely import-oriented. What's the way forward? To be perfectly honest, I do not see any other way forward but, number one, energy efficiency. So we have to start saving our energy. And number two, renewable energy sources. And with that, wind farms. Why wind farms? Not because, you know, I'm going to earn money from, you know, developing a wind farm, but because there is nothing else out there. Wind farms are the only large, you know, the energy objects which are large enough to matter. They can be built in 2 years. And they produce 70%, the wind in Serbia is such that 70% of production is during the winter when Serbia imports the most. That is why wind farms matter in Serbia. Now, if you start developing some other energy object now, renewable or not, it'll take you from, say, best case scenario 5 to optimal scenario 10 years. What are you going to do in the meantime in order to try and have some of your own production right now? So I think it's not, you know, it's not alternative, it's the only way forward for Serbia. And I'd just like to add to what Mr. Vlahović was saying about the, you know, different potentials for Serbia. One thing that's often not thought about in terms of green economy, but is very much green economy and very big potential of Serbia is sustainable mining. Mining in Serbia is there's a long tradition in mining. You know, there's a big expertise, and there are quite a lot of foreign companies, mostly Canadian and U.S., present in Serbia. Industry leaders, green, you know, green economy flagship companies, And these companies have, from 2003 to 2013, invested, and I think this is a little known fact, invested 200 million euros into exploration of different resources in Serbia, 200 million euros. If only 3% of the current exploration rights are turned into exploitation rights, this has the potential to bring to Serbia additional 3.5 billion euros of investment and about 1,000 new jobs. And these are all highly paid jobs. So in terms of wind, again, just to bottom line, my own company, the company I represent, together with the Kokkalis company and other companies that are members of the Serbia Wind Energy Association, have since 2009 to today invested 30 million euros in Serbia, so it's very real. 90% of this went straight into Serbian economy and for the Serbian companies. And we haven't even started construction. And that in itself is the investment potential, which is between 700 million and 1 billion euros. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much. You mentioned the topic of mineral resource extraction. Our next panelist actually comes from a country that knows a lot about mineral resources extraction. So the next panelist is our Mr. Badr Al-Lamki. He comes from Abu Dhabi. He's the director of clean energy in Masdar and has spent nearly 15 years in the energy sector, including with multinationals in the oil and gas area. But since 2008, he has been at Masdar. Now, Masdar is one of the pioneers in renewable energy and sustainable cities. Its mission is to invest in renewable energy and clean technology in both Abu Dhabi and around the world. And Masdar also has an important education arm, the Masdar Institute, which is a collaboration with MIT. Now, Masdar is also very interesting for another reason. As I said, it's based in Abu Dhabi, and Abu Dhabi literally happens to sit on 9% of global proven oil reserves. We heard this morning from Professor Sachs and from other speakers that, in fact, the oil and gas producers are not necessarily the countries or the players that are pushing very hard for in the climate change negotiations for speedy and strong targets. But paradoxically almost, therefore, Abu Dhabi is very interesting because Abu Dhabi is literally the global leader when it comes to sustainable energy. So can you tell us more about why actually Abu Dhabi, being at the core of oil and gas, is really at the forefront of clean energy, and potentially what we can learn from it, how we can use your experience to try to mitigate any kind of political pressures against the targets that we need to achieve in global CO2 reductions.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the question. First of all, allow me to thank the organizers, CIRSD, for pulling such an important dialogue today, bringing this topic on the agenda in this important region, and also at a very important timing, a few weeks ahead of COP20 and a year before the decisive COP21. So thank you, Your Excellency, and your team for putting such an excellent dialogue and platform for exchange of opinion, and for us from Masdar to come and share our experience of how we are doing and why we are doing it. Actually, for me, the uniqueness is not in the why, but rather the how. There's several reasons as to why we are doing it. Having sat on the 7th largest oil reserves, we are doing this because environmental stewardship, We have a legacy of being sensitive to the environment and sensitive towards reducing our own carbon footprint. And this has been a legacy from our founding father of the nation and throughout the current leadership of the nation. So doing something that is cautious and protective towards the environment is something that we embrace throughout our generation. So it's environmental stewardship. That's reason number one. Reason number two, well, intent to sustain leadership in the energy sector. There is a belief that hydrocarbon resources are going to diminish at some point in time in the distant future. The UAE has been a leader in supplying energy to the world, and the vision out there is for us to start from now to build as well capacities and experiences in new forms of energy so that we can sustain our position as a global energy supplier to the world. So leadership in energy sector, that's why we are doing this. We are doing this also from the angle of energy security. Again, dependence on one single source of energy supply is not necessary to the best interest of the country. So diversification of the energy mix to include other forms of energy, such as renewables and nuclear, is also part of the strategic thinking behind this initiative. And perhaps one another reason as to why is because it's economic. Looking at the agenda here, I mean, climate change for a green economy. And doing this also entails revenues, entails business making, entails creation of jobs. And I believe the only way for sustainable energy and sustainable growth to be sustainable is to approach it from a commercial viewpoint. And all our investments have to have that thinking and mindset as we progress. As I said, it's not the why that intrigues me to share with you this afternoon, but I think the how is probably more interested, at least from my perspective. When I joined Masdar and had the chance to understand the vision in more detail, I think the uniqueness of the approach for us is the fact that you are trying to address the entire value chain. This is an emerging sector, and it requires a lot of work, and there's still a lot to be done. And as such, we thought that we're going to approach it in a unique way by choice, and that is addressing the different components of the value chain. So at the heart of what we do, we have the institute, because we need those brains. I'm delighted to see here a young generation coming forward to hear more about this most exciting topic. But through the Masdar Institute, we create a platform to attract the brightest minds out there so that we can work on research and development and prepare the brains to crack the technical challenges that this sector experiences. So that's one component of what we do, building human capacity and creating platform for education. It's key. Number two, technology. And the way we chose to address technology, because again, it's an emerging sector, we have created funds, clean tech funds, growth equity funds. We invest in companies, allowing technological components that support this sector to become more commercial, access more market, and of course, then recoup our investment through sales or exits. But again, addressing technology is also part of the answer and the how. And then we looked at the energy. But often people look at energy from generation point of view. But I think it is also equally important to look at both sides, generation and consumption. So from a generation point of view, we have the clean energy business unit, which I head in particular, whereby we invest in renewable energy projects globally. We have investments in the UK, in Spain, in the Middle East. We are very much excited to explore opportunities in this region, as long as the opportunity will manifest a commercial value proposition for us. But generating renewables, reducing reliance on hydrocarbon resources is key also to help support sustainable growth moving forward. But as I said, it's not only about generation, but it's also about the way we consume energy, because it's interdependent, if you like. And for that, we've approached it from the angle of cities. So we have Masdar City, a platform which is out there, a program, a long-term program that is going to address energy efficiency. It's going to address the way we consume electricity more efficiently, the way we consume water more efficiently. Some of the specifics that we face in our part of the world is the interdependence between electricity and water. For us, most of our water resources come from water desalination, which is energy-intensive exercise. So you also try to find a way to advance the desalination technology, but couple it with renewable energy sources. So energy consumption is also very important, and I think the Balkan region here, Serbia and its neighbors, as also emerging economy. You have the benefit to shape your strategies early on, and also build in a balanced strategy that is going to help you diversify your energy mix for all the reasons that would make sense for you to consider. But also I encourage you, within the context of green economy, to look at energy efficiency, conservations of water, waste to energy, waste management in particular. All these aspects, we have enormous experience in Masdar, and we'll be happy and delighted to work with colleagues and peers here in Serbia in developing appropriate projects on a commercial basis.
Thank you very much for that. The following panelist, Mr. Nick Bullinger, is the CEO of Hecate Energy, a leading American-based developer of renewable energy project. His company is actively pursuing large-scale solar and wind projects internationally, including countries such as Jordan, Tanzania, Kenya, and Pakistan. Nick himself has more than 20 years of experience working in strategy and operations for energy and high-tech companies. Now, clean energy projects like wind farms or solar farms are seen as good for the planet, but very often they can be opposed by local communities when they are being developed. But you have managed to secure quite a lot of support of the local communities for your project because of a very unique and innovative model that you use and your focus on local economic development. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure. Thank you, Martin. And I will continue in English because that's the only language I speak. So, first, before I get into some specific examples of projects that we've worked on that are innovative and collaborative and public-private partnerships, I just wanted to, we spent a lot of time talking about the need for multinational and international cooperation, and without a doubt, that is critically important to addressing climate change, and it was well articulated this morning. Actually, that was probably the best articulation I've heard of the issue and the solution, in the past 2 decades. But the green economy, which is part of today's summit, is real, and it is happening. And there's very good examples around the world of different cities and states and provinces and countries and sets of countries that have taken action already. And one way to look at it, I think, is rather than just look at the power plants that have been built, because there's a lot of them that have been, is to look at some of the other indicators out there. And when you look at countries, Europe and the United States, Asia, Africa, there's a lot of small and medium businesses that have started up in the past 3 to 5 years that focus on energy. There's brand new courses, there's brand new degrees, and brand new graduates, more than there's probably ever been in the energy industry. 20 years ago, no one would have graduated from university and said they were pursuing a job in the energy field. It wasn't an exciting place to be. And there's a significant amount of venture capital and private equity that is flowing into renewable energy. So if you look at new businesses, new talent and enthusiasm, and new money, I think that that helps position cities and governments and countries to rethink their mindset on renewable energy. And our greatest successes have been in those cities and those governments that, rather than approach renewable energy as how do we justify the higher cost, rather than think of it as a higher cost, how do we maximize a greater investment, which is really what you're doing. So it's not justifying a higher cost, it's making a greater investment and then figuring out what kind of investment you wish to make, and how you wish to benefit from that. And there's really 4 categories that we see that communities and governments focus on when they're figuring out how to maximize their investment. First is just electricity strategy and electricity security. And this isn't just for the types of fuel independence and energy independence from importing fuels. It's also in the case of storms, which are a part of climate change. But in New Jersey, for example, the entire state of New Jersey is beginning to move to each city being able to be off-grid if it needs to be for up to 48 hours. That's part of an energy strategy that cities are implementing. Cities and communities and governments also look for jobs, and that can be either new jobs, brand new manufacturing jobs, brand new businesses, brand new services, or it can be just adding more revenue to existing companies, such as construction companies. The third area is training and education, and many communities and governments are interested in figuring out how they provide training and education, and even at the university level. But in the city of Los Angeles, part of the program that we teamed up with the city of Los Angeles to implement focuses on the primary level. And they're making a very long-term investment in renewable energy by starting education very young in the primary school system. And the fourth area is research and development. And whether that be research and development for emerging storage technologies, or in the case of our project in Tanzania, we're focusing on R&D on how you operate and maintain solar projects in East Africa, because solar projects there have a different operating climate and environment than they do in Southern California, for example. Even though the two climates are somewhat similar, how you implement operations and maintenance is very different. The research and development in Tanzania also needs to focus on how do you take solar power and make it applicable for 8,000 villages so that you can extract water from the ground to provide drinking water. Well, that kind of research and development isn't going to happen in Massachusetts or Canada or probably Europe. The best place for that research and development is going to be in East Africa. So those 4 areas, the electricity strategy and security, job creation, whether that's new jobs or fueling existing jobs, training and education, and R&D are really the 4 areas we focus on when we enter into a public-private partnership. And just a few examples before I turn the floor over. In San Antonio, Texas in 2012, we entered an agreement for 400 megawatts of solar PV. And as part of that solar project, there was also a commitment to bring 5 new companies to the city of San Antonio across the supply chain for solar PV that included solar modules, inverters, and the tracks and racking, and all the pieces and components that go into a solar project. And so 800 new jobs were created with a capital investment over $100 million just in the manufacturing sector, let alone the investment that was made in the actual solar facilities themselves. As I mentioned in Los Angeles, we worked with the city of Los Angeles to implement a program to build 190 megawatts of solar power. 20 megawatts of that, or about 20% of the total, had to be built in the city, with some of it built on top of schools. And as part of that, a nonprofit organization also joined the public-private partnership to develop a curriculum for primary and secondary education. And then in Tanzania, we're working in the capital city of Dodoma with the University of Dodoma. They are going to be opening a school of energy and the environmental sciences. As part of our public-private partnership, we have gained interest from the Ohio State University to be a sister university to help the University of Dodoma develop a curriculum that will train Tanzanians on renewable energy so that they will be able to maintain and install and develop future renewable energy projects. In addition, a 55 megawatt solar plant will be built on the campus to help encourage research and development, grant money, R&D. Just like you would build a hospital on a medical campus, putting renewable energy on an energy and environmental campus helps to foster R&D and education. So those are some examples of how we've been able to overcome resistance to not just the actual construction, but also the higher cost of solar power, is viewing it as an investment, and what other aspects of economic development or social development or human capacity development can you couple with the renewable energy development itself?
Thank you very much, Nick. So finally, our last panelist, last but not least, Petros Kokkalis. He's a businessman and entrepreneur from Greece. He's also the vice president of the well-known Kokkalis Foundation and secretary general of Organization Earth, which is an environmental education NGO. Petros was also previously the vice president of Intracom Holdings, which is one of the largest technology groups in southeastern Europe, and vice president and shareholder of Intralot, which is a gaming technology supplier. Education, you mentioned, Nick, you mentioned education as one of the key ways forward. Petros, your organization is very active in education in the area of sustainable development, green economy. Again, you also have some very, very interesting innovative models and lessons that you've learned. Can you tell us more about it?
Sure, Martin, thank you, and allow me to thank the organizers and Mr. Economists for organizing all this conference. It is my pleasure to be here. I will speak in English because, unfortunately, Serbian is Greek to me, so I will speak in English about education. Education about sustainable development. I think that, like Professor Sachs said yesterday, it is very important that first we need to imagine the future and then choose what future we need. So in this imagination exercise, education is central. Now we're facing a very challenging task of staying below the 2 Celsius limit. And Kuni from Japan said that if we are going to achieve that, it's going to take some magic. And that magic, the hardest part of that magic is to change the mindset. So that is what education does. What we do at Organization Earth is called by the United Nations non-typical education for sustainable development, which basically means that we run an open-air school for school children to come. Currently, we have about 50,000 kids coming from schools every year. And what we try to do is try to showcase and engage them as future citizens, as future consumers, and show them ways that they can become consumers that consume in a way that takes into account the fact that the resources of the planet are finite and not infinite. This is very important in the food and in the agriculture part. Kids immediately understand the connection between food and consumption. Unfortunately, I have to say that after going through about 80,000 kids now, about 75% of urban kids believe that tomatoes grow in the supermarket. So that is not a very sustainable way of food security or health and all that sustainability issues. We run seminars for urban citizens. Like Bandar said, citizens, urban populations are the biggest consumers. So we run seminars in sustainability skills, in reusing, reducing, recycling, in cycling, how do you recycle, everyday skills. We try to concentrate them and make them available to ordinary people, everyday people. In cooking, how do you cook locally, how do you cook seasonally, how do you cook with less than €1 per person. All these million ways that each and every one of us has to devise and find ways to do to help this goal of staying below 2 degrees Celsius. We also run a very successful program about relocating unemployed people. As you know, Greece is undergoing, let's say, a shift in its economic paradigm, and therefore we have large populations of unemployed in the urban centers, and at the same time we have a very deserted countryside. The urban unemployed have a high education but cannot afford to stay in the cities, yet they do possess some kind of asset in their village of origin. So we had about 1,000 people being trained to become farmers, organic farmers, small farmers, trying to capture that added value of the organic and traditional produce. And they went back to their villages, and they brought back to the villages a very necessary mindset of the urbanite, a person in the village who understands what's a business plan, who understands what is the problem of climate change, is a very helpful person to have in an empty village. So coming to the economy mostly, growing out of all of this, we had the idea brought in by one of our members, who is unfortunately not with us anymore, to create an incubator for startups that would not only be in the sustainable business themselves, because in Greece we have large opportunities in the renewable energy sector, in tourism, and in farming, which all need to be sustainable. So what we do is that we bring in very early age startups and help them set up businesses with investable business plans. Business plans, however, that are set up on the triple bottom line model, following the GRI metrics of the United Nations, or the Global Compact, so that they begin from the start to see the social impact and the environmental footprint as a source of value rather than cost. It's often the case that an established business that has a certain business model, to adapt to a sustainable green economy, it's pretty normal that in the beginning, in the short term, this is seen as a cost center. So it's very important that we help these new entrepreneurs capture the value of the other two components of the triple bottom line, the social and environmental impact. This has a greater impact because larger companies, established companies, function as sponsors and mentors. So they are being brought together with very young kids with a lot of innovative ideas about how to tackle these problems, ideas that couldn't come up from a top-down approach, but these kids have them. We have people who have, for example, a very efficient method of renewing, of recycling nutrients, basically, is this guy who has this project of using blood from the butchers areas to feed what he calls the ultimate recycling machine, the fly. He feeds flies, the flies reproduce, and he uses them to create fish food for fisheries. That recycles protein in three times more efficiently than currently fish food does, because fish food is actually small fish feeding larger fish. It's not very efficient. That's an extreme example. We have lots of other people doing renewables, a lot of new ideas in the sharing economy, in the circular economy, in the sharing consumption, and so on and so forth. But it's very important that there is a very public paradigm of trying to get things done in a different way, because we really can't afford to do them the way we used to do them anymore. Like it's often said, there is no planet B, and we have to help Kuni and Vuk get their job done in Paris next year. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Petros. So we've had a lot of interesting ideas on the table. What I found really fascinating is that even though this is a very diverse panel, we already have some convergence with several of the topics and ideas that were mentioned this morning. So for example, one thing that struck me was when Professor Sachs spoke this morning about 3 solutions to slowing down or potentially reversing climate change. 2 of them were energy efficiency and investment in renewable energy sources. This is something that a number of you have mentioned. So any kind of investment basically requires capital. I think it would be very interesting to hear from potentially you from the region. What do you think is the scale of the opportunity, but therefore also what are the kind of resources we're talking about in this part of the world? But we also have some investors here who develop projects, who invest in outside of their own geographies in some very interesting places. What would it take for you to come and invest in a place like Serbia in renewable or energy projects or energy efficiency? So who would like to start off?
But I'm not investor.
Well, you can tell us about the scale of the opportunity. Why don't you do your pitch to the investors?
So I can give you some basic figures regarding the mentioned strategy. The strategy says that by 2030, there should be change in structure of energy sources. Instead of 73%, which is today's thermal plant contribution should be 61% by 2030. Instead of 26%, sorry, hydro plants production in 2030 it should be more or less at the same level, 25. And finally, new renewable sources from very marginal, I would say 1%, Anna, today, very marginal 1% should be in 2030, 13%. So, what kind of investment are expecting in order to reach this kind of structure? According to the same strategy, it should be 2.5 billion, which is annually something around, so it's simply to calculate. But at the same time, it is very important to say that it will, together with energy efficiency, it will contribute to lowering CO2 emission. And by the way, Serbia is on the 5th place in Europe right now with 6.2 tons per capita annually. And by the way, it's twice compared with similar countries, twice larger compared with the similar countries in size and in GDP as well. So these are figures are expecting. In order to get there and to fulfill very, I would say, I don't want to say very optimistic, but very aggressive plan to reach this kind of structure in 2030, Serbia has to invest in capital expenditure 20% of this, which is not much, having in mind avoided cost savings that can be reached according to the same plan.
Miodrag.
I would like to wake up a little bit this auditorium and tell them the real story. I will continue on the Serbian.
No, this is not a joke. This is also a real story, but from the papers.
A good example is something that we're doing now in Kopaonik, because I became a fan of saving energy there. Whenever I see that there's a smoke coming out of somewhere, I feel like euros are flying away. Whenever there's smoke, that means that there's the energy is coming out of the chimney. I started with this investment, I don't know if you've seen that swimming pool that smokes during winter time when it's minus 20 outside. We heat it at 35 degrees. Last year, we spent 135,000 euros to heat the swimming pool. And then we were thinking how to save this money. So then we built in these thermal pumps. I'm asking people, how does this function? Basically, we dug out a little well in front of the hotel. We have water that we pump from the ground that has the temperature of 16 degrees. Through heat pumps, we pull out this water that has 16 degrees. We take it down to 6 degrees, and these delta 10 we are using for the heating process. Then we use this water, and annually we save 130,000 euros using the heat of the water that's in the ground. Of course, we put that water back into the ground. So then I asked, when we're using this water that has a temperature of 16 degrees, what about the quantity of the water that we're using in our toilets, in our water tanks, in water tubs? Then I say that the temperature is 24 degrees. And then I say, why do we use that when we can use wastewaters? And then they say, yes, in principle, you could use that. it. And when I was reading this literature, I can see that the world is heading in this direction more and more. For example, when you look at hotels, you have to heat the water. You have sanitary water, kitchen water, toilet water. They all have to be heated through the heating of the hotel itself. And then you put it back into the sewerage. Before you put it back, it has to go through a certain space that would transform the heat. So instead of using delta 16 to 6, this water that I'm extracting from the country, then I could use the water 22 to 24 degrees. But I just need to direct everything through one passage, and then I cool it again down to 6. So instead of delta 10, I could be using delta 15. Those that paid attention to my discussion, if they think a little more clearly, we all have this at home. We could all at our homes. Why do we use energy at our homes? To heat the water, to have sanitary water. Each household could have the same program and use this part, and then use safely 30% energy less than we are using now. A lot of people don't know this, but Vojvodina in particular and Serbia is the 5th country in Europe in wealth of geothermal energy. I was looking at the research, and already starting with the temperature from 100 meters to 500 meters. Above 500 meters, the temperature of water in Vojvodina is above 75 degrees. At 1,000 meters, the temperature is 110 degrees of water and soil. But of course, some areas like Kanjiža that already has the temperature of 75 degrees at lower altitudes, lower than 500. But some people would say that Avala is actually the warmest place. The essence of this is that when the Earth's crust is the thinnest, there you have the warmest places. The only problem with Avala is that there is no water, so they can't use the water. 40 years ago, engineers from some technical faculty created a project that still exists to extract the water from the Danube and to release it through Avala and then use the geothermal heat. And then this water send it back into the Danube. Technically, you don't lose any water, apart from the fact that you're using the heating energy. So this is limitless. We're all talking about the same thing today, the possibilities of applying new technologies, opening new jobs, and the possibilities are without limits. If we agreed that, I mean that at the level of the world, if the future is sustainable development and saving and green energy, those that start doing this first will have most benefit from that first. And of course, it takes a lot of work here. The education system change is a very important factor. And I will give you a good example. I am the first generation at the Faculty of Economics that graduated from IT technology in 1983. And I have this small company with 30 employees that perform the implementation of SAP. They were saying, you know, find new staff, find new people, especially because they're located in Novi Sad. The director said, no, there are no people. One of the best technical faculties in Novi Sad. And they said, well, we couldn't find any people. They all find jobs immediately. So there are no people looking for a job in that sector. Basically, there are no unemployed IT experts in that sector, especially young, educated that speak a foreign language. So the education system needs to be adapted to these new trends. And definitely, this green energy is an area where there's a lot of space for this, and there will even be more space. If we change our education system in this direction, we won't have any unemployed people. Just like in Novi Sad, they don't have any unemployed IT experts.
Well, you've been talking basically about innovations and technology, which is all music to my ears. And as has been said actually this morning, in fact, that's the third way, or the third possible solution towards sustainable climate change. I see Nick, he wants to say something on this topic.
I'll weigh in on finance, but probably not flushing toilets. So for the finance aspect of solar and wind and any energy technology, the the way I would view finance in a simple form is that when people invest in a project, you usually have a couple types of investors. You could have a bank that provides debt or a loan. You could have an equity investor that actually owns the project. And they're typically going to look at, in very simple forms, two areas when they're determining how much capital they're willing to provide and at what rate of return they will provide that capital. And they're going to look at the technology itself, the power plant, how does it operate? Will it actually produce electricity? Is it risky that it might fall apart in 5 years? Might there be some unexpected expenses in year 10? And then they're going to look at the risk of the contract itself to collect the money from whoever they're collecting the money from, which could typically be a utility or a utility that is somewhat owned by a government. The first aspect of that equation, which is the risk of the technology, I think the capital markets now are very efficient and provide, they have a good understanding of the existing technologies, not counting at battery storage, but wind, solar, geothermal, hydro, and you can get capital at a very fair rate of return and an attractive rate of return for energy projects. The second part of the equation, which is how does a country such as Serbia attract financing at a good rate of return, you need to have a contract that has a creditworthy counterparty, someone that the investor can be sure will pay their bills, or you need insurance instruments, and there's insurance companies that provide insurance, and they can provide insurance for instability caused by conflict, by terrorism. They can provide insurance if the utility fails to pay its bill. So there's multiple types of insurance. In Africa, several countries have actually gotten together and formed their own insurance company, where they essentially underwrite each other's risk so that an investor can be assured that they're going to get their payments. So it's a way of multinational cooperation, and it's not just adjacent countries in Africa that have done that. Certain countries have opted in to create their own insurance company to lower the cost of capital and to attract capital into projects, telecommunications, and energy. So I think right now the capital markets, there's capital available at an attractive rate for the technologies, the generation technologies that are available. It's incumbent upon the country itself, though, to make sure it tackles the risk of the country and the utility so that capital can be at an attractive rate. You can always get capital. The question is, at what rate are you going to get it? And there's things you can do to make sure you're getting a good cost of capital for the power project.
I just want to stress probably one challenge which appeared in the region, mostly in Croatia. There are, the awareness of necessity of using renewable energy is increasing more and more. And that's the fact, and that is not only pressed by law or by strategy according European Union, according to which we have to erase the production of energy from renewable sources, but it is, I think, what is the big challenge for investors. You could have access to the capital, but then you are faced with a changing in law. Usually you make the contract who will be the buyer of electricity. It's usually state-owned still state-owned, not privately owned entity. And besides that, the government changed several times the law in previous periods. So the subsidies, once for example, for wind energy getting down, then increase for solar energy, then changing, and investors are not sure that even in medium period, they will be, let's say, on the safe side. Another issue with which we had been faced are the decisions of local community. At the end of the day, you have to get license for building from local community. In a lot of examples, we have erasing, resistance. For example, specifically towards wind, wind energy. We have a lot of examples in Croatia where we have along the coast a lot of possibilities to place the wind technology, and in the same time a lot of also you know, covering with green synthesis. We want to protect the animals, we want to protect the environment, we want to protect. So sometimes it looks like the greening is for example, production of energy is in contrast with keeping safe the environment. I mean, we have a lot of examples that the people didn't allow to build even bigger solar energy production. So it's not still going very easy. Now we are in front of the new period of agriculture greening inside the European Union. And it's really a huge challenge. I don't know, who are not involved in agriculture, don't know. If you want to count, you know that you have these subsidies. European Union is very grateful in subsidies for agriculture, but now it is connected with greening. That means that you have at least 8% of total land to keep. You shouldn't work it 1 year, you should keep it, not work. And you know, the farmers are not understand still why they should do that. Why they should get subsidy if they are not work or not produce anything on one part of a land. So there is, I think it will be a challenge in the next 7 years because it's 7 years period. It is also connected with the way of production. If you are, it's pushing organic production and pushing, so much more subsidies is given to the farmers who will produce that way. So in my opinion, in European Union, greening will go, but it will be, I think it is needed education, it is needed explanation, and it is needed to be more explained that the rest of the world is coming in that way. Because we are somehow, we have feeling that we spend enormous money on greening and that in the same time it is only 10% of influence, European Union, on total global heating. So it is...
Well, I would suggest we have, I'm sure, a lot of people in the audience who want to ask questions. But before that, Anna and Miodrag wanted to say something quickly, and then we will open it up towards you, to your questions.
Yes, thank you. Well, firstly, I just need to say something that has always been amazing to me when we talk about the renewable energy sources, and I think wind farms in particular, because everyone knows that wind farms kill birds. Like, you know, that's the thing that you say when you say, you know, when you're against wind farms, you say you kill birds. And you know, and it's amazing that, you know, in Serbia, where you have 75% of electricity production on lignite, and where you have appalling statistics where, you know, according to different analysis, our annual cost to the healthcare system just because of, just as a direct consequence of pollution from electricity production varies between 4 and 5 billion euros annual. And then you say, well, but we are a little bit afraid because of the birds and bats. You have that in the country where the thermal power plant, the biggest one, Nikola Tesla, is putting 2,500 cubic meters of hot water per second into the Sava River, because they're taking the river out of Sava, cooling their reactors, and putting that hot water back into Sava free fall without any treatment of that hot water, and that's 2,500 cubic meters, which could actually be used for the district heating system. But then, and when we talk about the local communities, for example, we work in the local government municipality of Kovin. We also a part of our wind farm also in the municipality of Alibunar. We have excellent relationship with our local community. They're probably our biggest supporters. But a lot of it is down to, again, education and awareness. One thing was that there was a lot of people who were now, in all seriousness, worried about the bird life and the bats, and that is natural. And you being a representative of a green economy, and us trying to be a flagship project for the green economy in Serbia, you do whatever you have to do to reduce your adverse impact on the environment. And we did 2.5 years of continuous bird and bat monitoring to make sure that we know what we're doing or not doing. And so what we do, and usually these projects are financed by international financial institutions such as, for example, EBRD, they have much, much more stringent environmental requirements than local legislation does. So when we fulfill everything we need to fulfill for the environmental permit in Serbia, we do 5 times as much for EBRD and IFC than for the Serbian government. But then again, also, there is a lot of issue about noise. So what we've done is we took our local community representatives to our wind farm in Romania. They saw how it looks like, and what they said, but we thought it was noisy. So it's all about awareness and education, and the big problem in Serbia is that there is no, people do not turn to places that have this and learn, and and it is very, very difficult to build not just a wind farm, not a renewable energy source, in Serbia. Again, we're talking about the country that did not have a new energy object for 30 plus years. So, so when you talk about things like, for project finance, you need a power purchase agreement, a set of really sophisticated documents. How does the commissioning, the testing procedure for energy object, how does it look like? When you have investors coming to Serbia and say, how does it look like? Well, find the person who tested the large energy object in Serbia. They read it in books. It happened 35 years ago. There is not a professional today in Serbia that did the commissioning of an energy object. And then finally, which is also extremely important, these are the first independent power producers. So these are the investments that will open up Serbia's energy sector. So there are difficulties with that as well.
Well, thank you, Anna. So let's open it up to the audience. But before we do so, I have a proposal to make to you. We're all from business, so let's show the audience how fast, efficient, and flexible business can be. So we'll take a question and then a very nimble, efficient answer to it. I see a raised hand over there. Can we do we have microphones? Yes. Yeah, so let's wait for the microphone. And if you could please introduce yourself, and then if you would like to target the question to a specific member of the panel, please.
Okay, I'll introduce myself. I'm Čedo Maksimović. I'm professor at the Imperial College in London for almost 20 years. Before that, I was professor of civil engineering here in the water sector in Belgrade, just next door. My question will be to Mr. Kostić, but before I put the question, I will give a brief introduction to what I'm doing now, which is highly relevant. First of all, I would like to congratulate Mr. Jeremic and his team for organizing such a professional and highly relevant event. Second, I'm working in a project called Blue Green Dream. It's green economy, but also blue interaction with all the other dealing with water. And I'm dealing with this project for 2 years. I was so much surprised how much potential is all over the world. We have no single city. We have a lot of patchy technology all over the world. No single city which has consistent long-term strategy in challenging climate change in a proper way. They have bits of pieces, bit of how insulate walls, how to do some this and that, but no integrated city planning based on adaptation and resilience for climate change, not even at the university and so on. So there is a technology. Mr. Cooney this morning said, there is technology, there is money. I a bit disagree with this. I told him during the lunch. There is technology invented 50 years ago, recycled, put a lot of cosmetic on it, powerful presentations, a lot of colorful presentations, but technology, in most cases, is very old. Find me a place in the world where there is an architectural company, design company, city planning company, Ministry of Environment, Ministry of whatever, which has long-term strategic integrated policy. Fortunately, no. Fortunately, things are changing, and there is a technology to introduce this innovative, integrated planning, and that tackles this problem which is addressed here, energy, water. So, Mr. Kostić mentioned this problem, excellent, thermal energy, but this is just a small piece of the whole picture, what we should do in our city. China is planning, owing to Mr. Jeremic, I was last year in China Development Forum, they're planning 240 new cities, small ones, 2 million only each. India is planning 370, small ones. If we do not do something that we change our planning of our cities, including all water, energy, and food production, everything, we can forget about climate change and goals which are tackled this morning. So my question to Mr. Kostić, would you be ready to invest in a project which would develop this integrated planning somewhere in Serbia and serve? I would tell you that would be the world best exemplar in the. And this, I'm not joking, I'm talking, there's a lot of potential, not only in Koponi, but in other places. And also, the gentleman from Masdar, we've been, no, Masdar. In Masdar, there is a lot of potential also to improve things in Masdar itself to serve as an exemplar of city. So I'm not criticizing anybody. On the contrary, I'm encouraging all of the people, and also young people. I see a lot of young people here who do not wear they speak English, they are qualified, they are highly intelligent, and so on. And I will finish my presentation here and question.
Thank you.
If you are ready to invest, there is a team to help you.
So we had an investment pitch here.
Answer is very simple, yes. And I just want to, may I
of course.
Have 1 minute? Regarding what Nick said, just maybe you don't know where you are. I mean, from United States point of view, I understand completely what you are saying. You have there the startup, venture capital, blah, blah, all of these things. Then Europe, you have the high subsidy system, etc., etc., etc. You are coming the country which is the part of the world, same like United States. My proposal for you, and maybe even for Mr. Jeremic, like the organizer, co-organizer, his colleague from Japan, yes, both of you, Japan and United States. You developed in the last 50 or 70 years. You spend a lot of black energy and make a lot of pollution in the world. I think it will be minimum fair that you open the fund, which will supporting this poor country which don't understand how they will use the subsidy for develop and subsidize the new green project. Minimum because you are using a lot of benefit of that. Both of you, I mean not you personally, but your countries. And anytime when we're coming in our not highly educated government and asking for subsidy, they mean, you know, when they said the subsidy here, they mean this is giving the money to somebody. They totally forgot what means subsidy. Subsidy is supporting future productivity. And they don't know what it means that. But in this moment, specifically because we have it in a very bad economic situation, that's even more difficult to find any money for this project, what Professor Teofilovic said. But I would say there is some small private money, but we are not talking about billion. We are maybe talking about a few hundred million. Once again, Professor, my answer is yes.
No, a little bit of reflection about what has been said here, but just quickly on the proposal there from the professor. I understand you've already established contact with Masdar City. I'm happy to go and follow up with them and see if the dialogue will yield something of mutual benefit. Just back to the question of investor's perspective and what would an investor be looking at to invest in any given country, but also linking up with this discussion around subsidy and what have you. As an investor, and I think just to rephrase what my colleague here have said, as an investor, when I come to any country, it's very key and important for us to understand that is a solid energy policy out there that clearly identifies the energy mix, the targets, any specific considerations early on. I fully understand that governments from time to time will revise their strategies, but it's very also equally important that any revision in any policy or any targets is done for the future consideration and not retroactive. Because anything that goes back retroactively, that will definitely disturb the market confidence and definitely investors will shy away to come into any given country. Now, the issue of subsidy, I think you cannot go about it without also having the concept of opportunity loss into the mix. In one hand, there might be some subsidy being paid, but it's very important that if it is at all a subsidy, it is being reviewed, first of all, within the context of unsubsidized market price, and then also the opportunity loss that without this renewable energy solution, for example, the cost could have been twice as much. So I think there's a balance that governments would definitely need to take in mind while we talk about subsidies. I think we also need to look at the opportunity to be seized or to be lost.
Next question. And please try to be brief. We have about 20 more minutes, so let's try to get as many questions answered as possible.
Okay. My name is Stefan Radojcic, and I'm a law school student at University of Novi Sad. And we today have had opportunity to hear many facts from the point of view of the ILO. So I have one question regarding that point, and I would like to hear your answer from the point of view of the private sector. Namely, International Labour Organization creates legal framework in labor relations at international level. In that sense, it makes high impact at national legislation. And firstly, I would like to hear that impact, particularly in Serbia, in this field of green economy, since it is not quite formed field still. And secondly, according to your opinion, does the ILO sufficiently takes into account the newly formed circumstances on the ground when adopting their resolutions and recommendations as well?
Okay, so what ILO does it really have an effect here, and particularly on the segment?
Nobody wants to answer the question, so probably because we do not have a sufficient information how the ILO legislation is connected with our national legislation. But I think that it is very important to have a very clear approach and very clear negotiator in the name of trade unions, who is actually representatives of workers. So. And as far as I know, there is alignment between general ILO recommendation and national legislation. So how does it make an obstacles for the green economy development? I think that it might be seen from the perspective of those who are already invested in Serbia. Maybe Kole can give us some additional information. Kole, please.
But what can I say? And I think I would say you are too optimistic in this moment, and you are talking too far away of where the education system today in Serbia. We need to first make a first step. You're talking about step number 7 or whatever. I mean, what can I tell you today? What we are doing is we are offering in all our production facility, the former administration building, for example, in the sugar refinery Vrbac, we have the administration building where usually was employed at, I would say, 250 people. Now it's maybe 10. And we are now preparing this for the students from Novi Sad University. I already discussing with University of Agriculture, sorry, the agriculture, the Decan of Agriculture University there. And I'm ready to offer even for some other university from Belgrade to come and take more praxis, because, for example, when I'm looking for the secretary in my headquarter office here, usually I have about 10,000 applications. But when I am asking for the head of my energy unit of sugar refinery with the 5 years experience, I have 0. When I'm asking the, 3 years experience in technology of the sugar, 0. And that's the problem of Serbia today. For secretary, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. And I agree with you. We need to change something. And I don't think so that we need to wait any kind of the big story from international community, ILO, or somebody else. We need to change first in Serbia and make this first step, starting maybe with the Minister of Education.
Just one second. And by the way, it's ILO recommendation. It's not the strict rules that should be followed by national legislation.
Next question. Yes, lady there.
Thank you very much. My name is Violeta Orlović-Lovren, and I'm coming from Faculty of Philosophy of Belgrade University. Thank you very much for this very inspiring and good cases from all around the world, and for organizing this very needed conference. As I'm dealing with adult education and with education for environmental protection and sustainability for years, you can assume that I couldn't agree more with all of you who stress the importance of education and learning as a way of increasing awareness and knowledge in this field. But a few of you mentioned formal education system and needs for ministry to react, and needs for formal education system to be reformed. Good news is that some curriculum reform is on its way, supported by some European Union projects. But as we all know, it is a very slow process to wait to formal education system to give its results, to be changed, and so on. Meantime, we have several other options to invest in permanent education, learning, non-formal education of people who need it. And a few of you mentioned how needed it is in local community, in agriculture, to increase the knowledge. We heard very interesting Greek experience, and thank you for that. But I wanted to ask maybe Mrs. Puljić, first of all, or Mr. Kostić, business representatives who deal with business in Serbia, is investment in such type of learning, non-formal courses or improvement of knowledge of farmers or local community or your clients part of your investment strategy and practice? Thank you very much.
Maybe before we get there, why don't we call up a couple more questions, because time is running out, and I think then let's try to answer them in a batch. So there's a gentleman in the middle.
I'm going to speak in Serbian because I'm an old man to speak foreign languages. First of all, I would like to commend Mr. Gentleman from Abu Dhabi. that notice these young people because the future is ahead of them, but also criticism to Vuk Jeremić. I saw when they were taking photos outside, and I asked the young people, what is this about? They said that they had to pay a participation fee of 100 euros, 10,000 dinars. For the first time in Serbia, somebody is inviting people when there is no fee participation. So this is a conference. There is no registration fee. A question for Kostić. Are you ready for biogas? Croatia is dedicated to produce electric energy and heating using biomass. If we had so many floods this year that caused so much misfortune, we have the conditions for the best quantities of biomass in Europe. Are you willing to do this? Just this and nothing else.
Thank you. One more question, if we have. If not, then let's start with the education question.
Thank you for question. Yes, we have that in strategy, but not only in written strategy. We are doing that in practice. We are organizing the education courses specifically for farmers who are cooperating with us. So we really form, we call that our academy, agricultural academy, and we are collecting that farmers specifically during the winter and gave them the special courses connected not only with production, with the way of improving their production, their technology, but also of environmental questions, greening, etc., etc. So we are doing that because we are employing a lot of very high educated engineers who are specialists in special fields. So we internally have a lot of knowledge, and we decided really to, let's say, sparry that among the others, specifically in agriculture field, because we recognize that there is a lack of knowledge everywhere, not only in the direction of greening, but also in applying modern technologies in production, in improving, working on soil, etc., etc. So we are doing that.
There's no question that this is going to be a very knowledge-intensive operation if it's going to happen. It's all going to be based on knowledge, and every company needs to educate not only its consumer but its producers. I just wanted to say about non-formal education that we are an NGO teaching sustainable, we're doing education for sustainable development. That means that we have to be sustainable ourselves. So to go ahead of the question of Violeta about investment in non-formal education, I understand that formal education as performed by a state or something else is a very costly operation, and there needs to be social investment in that in a grand scale. And there needs to be space for private investment to help the state produce that. However, it is very important that the civil society innovates and finds ways to produce this social capital. We had to run a very hybrid organization, which means that there is a for-profit and non-profit. The for-profit is there to be able to cooperate with businesses and attract corporate partners. The non-profit is there to attract donors, or we pay tickets, we charge tickets, which is a fantastic way, because if you want to be sustainable by selling tickets, that means that what you do must be fun. And that allows us to portray the environmental problem not as a disaster, not something as a guilty trip that, you know, the earth is dying, what are you doing? But to put it in a way that it's fun and it's good for you to be part of it, so you come back and buy more tickets and become sustainable. So sustainability is it's very much about the mindset and the innovation of the civic society. And just to end that, because on the previous question about investment, I am the first to believe that if any of this happens, is going to happen, it has to be financially sustainable. But the gentleman from the UN and the general economy and the global economy must come to see what does financial sustainability means. What are we counting? Nick spoke about return on capital. We, as an NGO, are producing social capital. We're producing social goodwill. We're doing something good. This doesn't apply in our bottom line. The money is not there. We produce something good, but it's not counted. So it's imperative that we move fastly forward to the point where polluters pay, where we do not charge the citizen who puts down 10 kilos of garbage unrecycled on the road, the same municipal taxes with the citizen who is recycling, who is composting and putting down 1 kilo per week. We need to move fastly towards a more or less mandatory triple bottom line financial accounting. I think this is crucial if we're going to talk about investment.
Anna? You wanted to say something quickly about education?
Yeah, just to add on the formal education, actually I think good news there is that we're not really that much behind. You know, you have University of Belgrade, the University of Novi Sad, Faculty of Electrical Engineering, that you have specializations in renewable energy sources, and that, you know, each renewable energy source in particular. So, for example, I know a person who did a PhD in solar, and she's probably the biggest local expert in renewable energy sources. So we have that. And I'd also like to point out the excellent example of the University of Belgrade, the Faculty of Architecture, that introduce for their master students 1 semester LEED certification, so green building design, so leadership in energy and environmental design. And you have master students today in Serbia that do earn points to be certificate as green building assessors, basically, which is great.
Okay, now we had a question about biogas, which is very interesting to me because 6 years ago I was helping with a foreign company that was actually interested in developing and investing in biogas power plants in Serbia, and it never happened because the right legal framework was not in place. So has things actually changed since then?
But how I see you have the answer. I mean, the framework is, of course, the base of all of that. Biogas, I see the first time 10 years ago. And the problem is the project of biogas in Serbia based on the waste of the agriculture production is not sustainable. And much more sustainable is ethanol second generation. And maybe not so many people know what we are talking about. It's the first generation ethanol is based, first of all, on the agriculture commodity production and corn or wheat, barley. But then after that, you see it a few years ago that increased dramatically the price 2-3 times. The ethanol second generation, which is built only one in Italy, is based on cellulosic materials, which is mainly the byproducts of the agriculture production, which we have really a lot. That's the answer for you. And Serbia has big resources for that. But without this framework, what you are talking, I don't think so that we are ready to do that. Honestly, I introduced this Italian investor in ethanol second generation with the EBRD. They are working now together. And we are more than 1 year in the contact and looking how we can do that in Serbia. But without the framework, will not work.
Well, thank you very much for it. I'm afraid we're running out of time. We're actually already out of time, but it's a very, very interesting closing because I think we've come full circle to this morning when we were basically discussing the role of the government, and it's so clear that business cannot do anything without a government, but on the other hand, if we really want to push forward sustainable solutions, then the business has to play and stay at the forefront of it. So let me, at the end, thank you very much, all the panelists. This has been very, very fascinating. Let me once again thank the Center for International Relations and Sustainable Development for having put together a very, very timely conference. This is, by the way, already the second one in 6 months. Very impressive. And then let me call now to the podium the man without whom this would not have happened. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jeremic.
Well, thank you very much, Martin, for these two kind words. I want to thank you all for having joined us since this morning. It was a fascinating discussion, and we've had a privilege to hear from some of the world's leading experts. We had Professor Sachs talking about climate change. We had my good friend Kumi from Japan, a veteran of Kyoto, the guy who's been the face of Japan for many years when it comes to climate negotiations. We had our guest from Singapore. We had regional ministers talking to us about where the governments of this part of the world stand with regard to this critical issue. And then last but by no means least, we've heard from regional business leaders as well as our friends from afar, from the United States, from the Gulf. We heard also about the education, and somebody who came from Greece talked about the education, and in a very real sense, thanks to the Kokkalis Foundation, I can claim some of the educational credit that I've had in my life. So it is a very relevant source to talk about the education, the Kokkalis family. I think it was a very good mix. It ended up converging to the discussion as to how the business and the government, as well as the civil sector, can work together. Our hope was to bring it all to a one point, and I hope that we have at least partially succeeded in opening up the floor for learning. It was an educational experience for me, certainly, and I hope it has been for at least some of you. We are going to continue with this, and we're going to continue trying to bring serious international discussion to Serbia, to try and bring significant speakers to Serbia coming from different angles and from different areas. We're not going to be doing only events in Serbia. Our next big conference is actually next month with Turkish leaders and Chinese leaders. We are organizing a big conference in Istanbul on the new Silk Road, which has to do a lot with whether this road's going to be green and how green is that going to be. So it actually ties in nicely into what we have discussed here. But it was an amazing experience for me personally. Thank you for sharing in this experience with us, and thank you so much for having contributed to this discussion, an important discussion for Belgrade, one of the many to come. Thank you very much.